Hey guys, Gons here with another video for the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. A couple of days ago, my buddy Mario, the Vigilant Christian, messaged me with a link to an article by the Vigilant Citizen called Lucy, a movie about Luciferian philosophy. After reading the article, I had to check out the film for myself, so I redboxed the film. Yes, I'm one of those people that doesn't have Netflix. Don't judge me. Now that I finished watching the film, I have a lot to say about it. And the article by the Vigilant Citizen was very helpful in launching this discussion, and I'll be quoting from it several times, but I have a lot to add to it, so here it goes. Lucy was written and directed by Luc Besson and was released on July 25th, 2014, starring Scarlett Johansson and Morgan Freeman. Now, first off, is Morgan Freeman the spokesperson for the Luciferian philosophy? I mean, seriously, the man who played God in Bruce Almighty back in 2003 has been in an impressive list of films as of late. You have Batman Begins, War of the Worlds, The Dark Knight Rises, Olympus Has Fallen, Oblivion, The Lego Movie, yes, The Lego Movie, and in 2014 alone, he's had back-to-back appearances in Transcendence with Johnny Depp and Lucy, both films promoting the transhumanist and Luciferian agenda. So what's up with Morgan Freeman being in all these films? Maybe they like a guy who renounced his Christianity at a young age and denied himself to be a man of God.
And you've said before, Morgan, that you're a man of God. When you did this, and so many of these questions were posed.
When did I say I was a man of God?
You're not?
No.
You're a man of faith.
Faith. It's a big difference.
So all right. So the question of faith leads us most of the time to a God. What is your view of faith?
The question of faith is whatever you actually believe is.
But let's get on with the film. Well, sort of. First off, I thought it was interesting that the film was produced by the Europa Corp. Now, this is an independent French film production company founded by the writer and director of Lucy, Luc Besson. Now, it's interesting to note that Europa is one of the moons of Jupiter. Is it coincidence that Jupiter Ascending hit the theaters recently, conveniently at the time when Jupiter was actually raising in the sky? It makes one wonder. But even more fascinating is the fact that Europa is now considered as a planet that might prove alien life. Some have even suggested that the planet from the movie Avatar was based on Europa. In Phoenician and Greek mythologies, Europa was courted by Zeus and became the queen of Crete. And if you look around the world, you'll see depictions of Europa riding the bull, which reminds us of the recent satanic ritual performed by Madonna at the Grammy Awards. But enough about that right now, let's get into the film. To get an overview of the movie Lucy, I thought the Vigilant Citizen did a good job summarizing what it was about. Quote, Lucy is a science fiction movie that combines profound existential questions with a bunch of action scenes involving Asian gangsters. While this dichotomy wasn't well received by critics, there is an esoteric message hiding behind it all. Lucy is indeed more than a movie in which Scarlett Johansson being a badass. It is an allegorical tale celebrating the philosophy of the elite, Luciferianism, end quote. Now, for those who don't know, the Luciferian philosophy comes from the word Lucifer, which means light bearer, and suggests that the serpent, or the Ha-Nakash, the shining one in the Garden of Eden, was actually the good guy who freed Adam and Eve from the evil god Yahweh, who had imprisoned them in the Garden of Eden. The idea was that Lucifer freed them with the gift of knowledge. This theme has been part of Masonry and the Illumined circles for centuries, and is depicted in the film. Albert Pike, in his 1871 book Morals and Dogma, stated this, quote, Lucifer, the light bearer, strange and mysterious name to give the spirit of darkness. Lucifer, the son of the morning. It is he who bears the light. Doubt it not, end quote. And in 1888, Helena Blavatsky, the founder of Theosophy, wrote this in her book, The Secret Doctrine, Volume 1. Quote, there is a whole philosophy of dogmatic craft in the reason why the first archangel who sprang from the depths of chaos was called Lux, Lucifer, the luminous son of the morning, or Manvantric dawn. He was transformed by the church into Lucifer, or Satan, because he is higher and older than Jehovah and had to be sacrificed to a new dogma, end quote. And another quote from Blavatsky that will become very apparent in the early depictions of the film is, quote, and now it stands proven that Satan, or the red fiery dragon, the lord of phosphorus, and Lucifer, or light bearer, is in us. It is our mind, our tempter and redeemer, our intelligent liberator and savior from pure animalism, end quote. That comes from The Secret Doctrine, Volume 2. And there's more. In the sequel to 2001 Space Odyssey, called 2010 Odyssey 2 by Arthur C. Clarke, stated in the written version of the novel, quote, a generation would soon be born that had never known a world without Lucifer, end quote. The novel also included a section called Lucifer Rising. The point is, the concept has been around for many years, and it's even where we get the term Illuminati, because those that hold the sacred knowledge of Lucifer, the light bearer, are described as the illumined ones. The Vigilant Citizen states that Lucy ties Luciferianism with transhumanism, which I believe is accurate. But after seeing the film for myself, I think it actually goes beyond transhumanism and into the deeper esoteric concepts of the Luciferian doctrine of Apotheosis and the Singularity, of which transhumanism is a major stepping stone. In my film Age of Deceit, Alchemy and the Rise of the Beast Image, I talked about how the ancient tradition of alchemy, often thought of to be turning base metals into gold, was a metaphor for the human being transforming from creatures of flesh into gods. And as such, I described how the search for the enigmatic Philosopher's Stone has been at the heart of the occult elite for centuries. Furthermore, I suggested that technology will play a major role in uncovering that enigmatic Philosopher's Stone. This is all depicted in the film. Apotheosis is defined as elevation to divine status, and if you think this is a new idea, well, examples of this have been made in art throughout the centuries. One of the most popular here in the US being a painting of George Washington being deified in the rotunda, in a mural called The Apotheosis of George Washington. I simply ask why our nation's capital depicts our first president as turning into a god. The singularity, or more specifically the technological singularity, is a hypothesis that says accelerating progress and technologies will eventually cause a runaway effect where artificial intelligence will exceed human intellectual capacity and control. Ray Kurzweil and others have suggested that we have no idea what will happen if and when we reach a technological singularity, another idea that's depicted in the film. When Ray Kurzweil was asked when the singularity will occur, he stated, quote, "I set the date for the singularity, representing a profound and disruptive transformation in human capability, as 2045. The non-biological intelligence created in that year will be 1 billion times more powerful than all human intelligence today." End quote. The first line of the film Lucy is, quote, "Life was given to us 1 billion years ago. What have we done with it?" This already indicates the presupposition that 1, life was given to us, and 2, we as humans are responsible for our own destiny. These ideas are very humanistic in principle, which stems back to the Luciferian doctrine, which states that Lucifer is the life giver, and that through this gift of knowledge we will come to our ultimate liberation from the confines of space, time, and matter. The film is set in China, where Lucy is being pressured by some low-life boyfriend druggie into delivering a suitcase, which is identified later as being the substance that enhances her. Throughout the film, but especially at the beginning, there are fast-cutting scenes with elements of nature that serve as commentary for the situation in the dialogue. During this particular exchange between Lucy and her deadbeat boyfriend are flashes of a nightclub party scene, equating such behavior as primitive and animalistic. Lucy is forced to deliver the suitcase and finds herself in a violent situation, full of blood, death, and carnage perpetrated by the Asian thugs whom the case was being delivered to. During this sequence, more animalistic behavior is depicted by interlacing shots of the leopard hunting deer in the wild. Lucy, who was the one being preyed upon in the scene, just so happened to be wearing a jacket with spots like a leopard, serving as foreshadow of what she would become, not the hunted, but the hunter, and way beyond. The other interesting element of this is that a leopard is described as what the beast looked like in Revelation 13, something that I will explore in a future video. But the main overall point was this: the animalistic side of human beings is the starting point, ground zero on the road to godhood as the film depicts it. The same point is made when Lucy is forced into the hotel room with the main man drug dealer dude who was in the middle of killing some folks in the closet. When he emerges covered in blood, the scene takes an unusually long time, showing him cleaning the blood off of his hands with water. I believe this was signifying that humanity, or man, is guilty of not being responsible agents of life. But the deeper implications we will see later is that this Asian gang leader, I believe, was a mocking representative of Jesus Christ, and I'll show later why. But staying on point here, I believe the washing of the blood here signified a common atheistic accusation that mankind, especially with their religion, has been responsible for much bloodshed throughout the centuries. Now earlier I mentioned a flash scene of Lucy partying, used as a commentary that such behavior is part of the animalistic side of humans. Well, after the suitcase was opened by Lucy, the blue substance they find inside is tested by the thugs by bringing in one of their hostage prisoners and making him snort the blue crystal. The guy who was forced to snort it was wearing a shirt that said "Youth in Revolt," which I thought was very interesting. Perhaps this was an indication that the youth who are unworthy of being included in the illumination of man have been manipulated into appearing appealing to their animalistic instincts in rebellion of authority, hooked on drugs, etc., so as not only to dumb down, but to keep down society at large from ever gaining any insight or access to the sacred knowledge. Speaking of knowledge, up until this point, we had only followed Lucy and how she got into this situation, but in the meantime, there are scenes interjected from a lecture given by Professor Norman, played by Morgan Freeman. In another mind control-like manner, a montage that includes human accomplishments flashes across the screen. I thought it was interesting that along with modern technological developments, like cities, were included the ancient pyramids, and furthermore, the worship of the Kaaba stone by the Muslims. As commentary for when this video is being recorded, and even given the time when the film was released, which was summer 2014, it is strange that this imagery will be shown. Perhaps this was some kind of admission that Islam itself was a fabricated religion by the elite, or at best, something used by the elite to perpetrate this cycle of death and war we see on this planet. Cutting back to Dr. Norman, an expose on the Luciferian doctrine via the transhuman processes is displayed. Without getting into all the details, he asserts that the commodity of mankind and life is time, very similar to what we saw in Jupiter Ascending. Thus, for the survival of the species is to either reproduce or become immortal. He uses a biological cell as an analogy when he states, quote, "If its habitat is not favorably nurturing or sufficient," interject montage of natural disasters, "the cell will choose immortality. If the habitat is favorable," insert serene and peaceful scenery, "they will choose to reproduce. That way, when they die, they hand down essential information to the next cell," and so on. This knowledge and learning are handed down through time. The scene cuts back to Lucy waking up from surgery, where the blue substance inside of a plastic bag was surgically inserted into her intestines so she can smuggle it into other countries. In fact, she was one out of several people who were deployed for the task. She is then whisked away with the dark bag over her face. Lucy then finds herself in the hands of another set of Asian gangsters who are responsible for her deployment. When one of them tries to seduce Lucy, she responds with, quote, "I'm not in the mood," perhaps symbolic of what was about to occur, an end of any need for reproduction, but rather a pursuit for immortality, just as Dr. Norman had just explained. At this point, the Asian gangster gets mad at Lucy and proceeds to kick her right in the stomach where the bag filled with the crystals were surgically inserted. Upon the kicks, the bag rips and the crystals make contact with her flesh. This is where Lucy's transformation begins. A nice CGI sequence of her red blood cells being electrified with the blue substance proceeds, all while Lucy convulses in gravity-defying fashion. Cutting back to Dr. Norman, still in his lecture, describes the next stages of human evolution. He explains, quote, "We use 10% of our brain. 20 will give us complete control of ourselves. 40 will give us control of others. After that, the control of matter." When one of the students asked him what happens at 100%, Dr. Norman said he has no idea, an obvious nod to Ray Kurzweil, who had stated something similar. As Lucy awakens from her convulsions, her brain access went from 10%, which as a side note is not true that humans only use 10% of their brains, but it's part of the storyline, to 20%. She then uses lust to lure her escape. This again, I believe, is a commentary of the ideologies of the elite who abide to the Luciferian doctrine. In other words, they know that sex sells, and thus, they have used it in culture to manipulate the masses. As Lucy gets out, she goes on a killing spree. The Vigilant Citizen puts it this way, quote, "While killing those involved with her capture is somewhat understandable, although she probably didn't need to kill everybody, the bloodshed does not end there. When she goes outside, she shoots a taxi driver in the leg because he did not immediately comply with her request. Later in the movie, Lucy drives like a crazy person and causes a 10-car pileup. The pain Lucy causes is also psychological. When a doctor asks Lucy to prove her powers, she enters his brain and reminds him of the death of his daughter in specific detail. She could have told him about the color of his car, but why do that when you can talk about the most painful memory imaginable? Lucy's transformation takes a very specific direction, and being a good person is not a part of it. Her metamorphosis caused her to completely lack moral values, compassion, and consideration for other human beings. Apparently, being extremely intelligent turns you into an evil transhuman robot. Lucy herself says, quote, "I don't feel pain, fear, desire. It's like all things that make us human are fading away. It's like the less human I feel, all this knowledge about everything, quantum physics, applied mathematics, the infinite capacity of a cell's nucleus, they're all exploding inside my brain." This is a quote we will revisit later on. When Lucy rampages her way into a hospital to have the bag of crystals removed from her intestines, she calls her mother and reveals her sense of losing her humanity, stating, quote, "I feel everything. Space, the air, the vibrations, the people. I can feel the gravity. I can feel the rotation of the earth. And leaving my body, the blood in my veins, I can feel my brain. the deepest parts of my memory. She goes on to recall memories of infancy and proceeds to tell her mom she loves her and her dad. As the package of crystals are removed from her stomach, the doctor somehow knows what it is and explains that it's a substance called CPH4. It is explained by the doctor in this way, quote, pregnant women manufacture CPH4 in the 6th week of pregnancy in tiny quantities. For a baby, it packs the power of an atomic bomb. It's what gives the fetus the necessary energy to form the bones in its body. I heard they tried to make a synthetic version of it, end quote. This substance has been a major topic of discussion online, sparking discussions to the accuracy of the substance, especially after the director stated that the substance is real. The Vigilant Citizen quoted an interview with the director. He stated, quote, is there any scientific truth to Luc Besson's premise? Here's a part of an interview with Besson discussing the science behind Lucy. Question. Some people are complaining about the fact that the science behind your film, the whole idea that humans only use 10% of their brains, is not true. What's your response to that? Answer. It's totally not true. Do they think that I don't know this? I worked on this thing for 9 years and they think that I don't know it's not true? Of course I know it's not true. But you know, there are lots of facts in the film that are totally right. The CPH4, even if it's not the real name, because I want to hide the real name, this molecule exists and is carried by women at 6 weeks of pregnancy. End quote. While this is interesting to consider, I think in reality it's taking something that has interesting attributes for the human development in the womb and using it analogously rather than literally for the film. The substance is quote-unquote real, but the effects are dramatized for the sake of storytelling, in my opinion. Rather, the implications metaphorically are that similar to a baby in the womb whose growth accelerates rapidly with the release of this alleged hormone in week 6, we humans are in this embryonic stage until we discover or unlock what alchemy has been teaching for centuries as the Philosopher's Stone. In other words, CPH4 is a metaphor for the Philosopher's Stone, and the mere fact that it was a natural occurring substance that was synthetically manufactured in the film speaks into the idea that it will be man to discover and recreate this substance that grants access for humanity into higher spheres of existence, unlocking our full human potential. Now earlier I said that the Asian thug leader, I thought, represented a mockery of Jesus Christ. Here's why I think that. Lucy goes back to her original captors, and when she finds the leader of the Asian gang, she does something very interesting in revenge. She puts knives through his hands. Was this mocking the crucifixion of Jesus Christ? Her next lines to me was really the spirit of Lucifer coming through the screen. She states, quote, learning's always a painful process. Like when you're little and your bones are growing and you ache all over. Can you believe I can remember the sound of my own bones growing? Like this grinding under the skin? Everything is different now, like sounds or music that I can understand, like fluids. It's funny, I used to be so concerned with who I was and what I wanted to be. And now that I have access to the furthest reaches of my brain, I see things clearly and realize that what makes us us, it's primitive. They're all obstacles. Does that make any sense? Like this pain you are experiencing. It's blocking you from understanding. All you know now is pain. That's all you know. Pain. End quote. After this, she proceeds to use ESP to dive into the gangster's mind and find out where the others who had been chosen to smuggle the substance were sent. Another example of supernatural powers that accompany this ascension of man. At 28% of access to her brain, Lucy tracks down Dr. Norman and calls him up, explaining to him that not only had she read all his material, which occurred over a few seconds as she basically downloaded the data off the internet, but that he was right on track. She explained to Dr. Norman of her abilities and demonstrated it with her control over phones, radio, and computers. This is obviously similar to the NSA spying on us through all sorts of devices. And in the Vigilant Citizen article, he points out that the TV and all the gadgets in the movie are from Samsung, a company that was recently in the news for their ability to, quote, watch us back through the TV. But think about what's being portrayed here and why we are being watched and surveilled. It's because of this Luciferian doctrine that is behind it. In other words, the elite feel justified in doing all this spying because they believe it is part of their metamorphosis into godhood and being omniscient. This is also the scene where Lucy explains herself in a quote I cited earlier where she says, quote, I feel no pain, fear, desire. It's like all things that make us human are fading away. It's like the less human I feel, all this knowledge about everything, quantum physics, applied mathematics, the infinite capacity inside of a cell, it's all exploding in my brain. I don't know what to do with it. And according to Dr. Norman, what she should do with it is pass it down. This is fascinating because it's precisely what the Watchers, or the fallen angels, are depicted as doing in the Book of Enoch. According to the text, this was an act of defiance to God because mankind would not handle this information properly. In the Book of Enoch, chapter 10, verses 6 through 8, it states, quote, "And so that, on the great day of judgment, he may be hurled into the fire, and restore the earth which the angels have ruined, and announce the restoration of the earth. For I shall restore the earth, so that not all the sons of men shall be destroyed because of the knowledge which the Watchers made known and taught to their sons. And the whole earth had been ruined by the teaching of the works of Azazel, and against him write all sin." As the film progresses in a moment of near destruction, when Lucy's environment didn't suit her nurture, she emerges from the event with not only control of others, but more and more control of physical reality, even with the capacity to see, isolate, and read cell phone signals. As we march towards the end of the film, let me briefly interject here that this wasn't the best movie in terms of flow or acting, but it didn't have to be. It wasn't about making a good movie. It was about externalizing the philosophy to the masses in order to indoctrinate them. And it was also a ritual, or apotheosis, on screen, as we will come to see. This is precisely what Alice Bailey, another occultist, termed in the externalization of the hierarchy. She states in it, quote, "The method of communication between the members of the hierarchy has to be externalized eventually upon Earth, and this is one of the tasks of the group. It might be of service to you if I outlined a little more clearly what is the purpose of the new seed groups in terms of the new age civilization and culture, so that the practical results might be visioned with clarity and some new ideas emerge as to the quality of the coming new world order." End quote. So as we lead up to Lucy's apotheosis, she has to get a hold of the rest of the CPH4, or the Philosopher's Stone, for her final transformation. So on her way to attaining it, from a convergence of Asian thugs, the French authority, and the hostages which the substance was surgically implanted into their tummies, Lucy takes a peculiar route to the location, and I believe this sequence or car chase scene was very deliberate and symbolic of the occult initiation and the ceremony about to take place. After flipping over some cars, injuring civilians, and probably killing some of them, we see Lucy driving towards an obelisk. Now this is going to get a bit fringe, but again I think this is completely intentional. This is the obelisk of Luxor at the Place de la Concorde in France. This is what it looks like from up high. Now I'm using this drawing because Google Earth won't let me use actual footage, but you guys can go look for yourselves. I will leave the coordinates in the description section. But here's what we see. Lucy heads straight towards the obelisk. Then she makes a hard left turn, so she becomes parallel with this interesting geographical layout. And I know this is the direction she took because right after, Lucy is seen driving by the Vendôme column, which is found here. So as she moves up this geographical layout, she would have passed the Arc de Triomphe de Carrousel, or the Arc of Triumph, which leads to a symbol of the rising phoenix, which also resembles the Eye of Horus, which then gives way to the Louvre Pyramid, or the Glass Pyramid, of which, if you recall, in the Da Vinci Code is where Mary Magdalene might have been buried in a submerged stone pyramid beneath the inverted pyramid. Now all this again leads to the idea of searching for and attaining the stone to unlock the keys for illumination. And what does Lucy do once she takes this passage? She retrieves all the CPH4, then proceeds to meet up with Dr. Norman for her, quote, sacrifice, which is her apotheosis. Once in the presence of Dr. Norman and his team members, Lucy explains the nature of reality, which was basically pantheistic monism. Monism is defined as the view that reality is a unified whole and that there is an ultimate substance behind all of nature. And furthermore, pantheistic monism identifies God with the universe and all that is in it. It is summarized often with the phrase, all is one is all is God. As her transformation begins, first we see the Philosopher's Stone interact with her larynx. Now if you recall a video, Androgyny and the Antichrist, I quote Bill Cooper, who mentioned the ancient alchemical beliefs that said mankind was lifted from primordial animal and given a brain and a larynx as tools to guide us to godhood. So it's no surprise to see the larynx depicted here. Then we see Lucy emit light from her mouth. This is the final transition into apotheosis. Now something to note here is that Jesus Christ, in his transfiguration events, displayed what seemed to be the very same thing that occultists have been trying to achieve. For example, in Matthew 17:2, we read, quote, "And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. Revelation 10 verse 1 reports of a similar instance, where Jesus is described with a face that shone like the sun. But more interesting to this depiction of Lucy's apotheosis, with light beaming from her mouth, is found in Revelation 1:16, where it states, quote, "In his right hand he held 7 stars. From his mouth came a sharp, two-edged sword, and his face was like the sun, shining in full strength." This imagery of a sword coming out of Jesus' mouth is depicted 3 more times in the book of Revelation, chapter 2 verse 16, and chapter 19 verses 15 and 21. So what might be going on here? Well, it is my belief that Jesus, the only begotten Son of God, and the first fruits of the resurrection, is the authentic God-man, whose glory in full form is so mighty and powerful that all knees will bow to him and call him Lord. Yet what the occultists and alchemists have been trying to do all this time is to achieve this same level of immortality on their own terms. And Lucifer has been lying to mankind, desiring to emulate the Almighty God that he can never surpass in his own created limitations. I will cite a couple more verses to show this at the end of the video, but let's get back to Lucy. As her transformation continues, she begins to excrete a black-like tar substance, reaching for nearby computers as she promised Dr. Norman that she would create a new supercomputer to help pass on the sacred knowledge. The shape of the substance created around Lucy extends in 5 different directions. The Vigilant Citizen identified this as the pentagram, and while I do think that's true, I believe the deeper implications were that she was turning into a universal mind or a global brain. I think this is so because of something called the astrocyte, which is a star-shaped cell found in the brain and the spinal cord. And while research continues as to how these cells operate in the brain, I don't think it's a mistake that Lucy has 5 tentacles in her apotheosis moment. As the apotheosis continues, Lucy is taken back through time. In fact, the final thing she conquers in transforming into a god is control of time. She is taken all the way back to the presence of the alleged first humanoid ancestor, according to the theory of evolution, properly named Lucy. And in true Luciferian fashion, she extends her finger and gives the earthbound humanoid the spark of life, or the light of illumination, the gift of knowledge. Lucy is Lucifer, the light bearer. Meanwhile, outside the doors of this science lab, the violence persists as the Asian gang leader and those with him make their way to find Lucy to kill her. In the process, the statue of Robert de Sorbonne, who was a 13th century French theologian who was an advocate for higher education and is now associated with the University of Paris, is destroyed. I think the fact that the nose was destroyed on the statue is reminiscent of the Sphinx and could be commentary suggesting that man's own animalistic behavior was responsible for ancient instances where humans ignorantly caused the destruction of knowledge while the illumined ones attained immortality. Thus, the futility of man's ability to harness and use this knowledge for good. And perhaps another reason why the occult elite feel that the knowledge has to be kept hidden in plain sight, like in this film. As Lucy reaches 90% capacity and beyond, the Asian gang leader finds her and is about to pull the trigger of the gun pointed right at her head. But in that moment, she is transferred into the Singularity, reaches 100% brain capacity, and disappears, becoming God. The Asian thug is then killed by one of the French authorities who was in the car chase with Lucy earlier. Then the supercomputer that Lucy had built provides a flash drive for Dr. Norman, which contains all the knowledge of the universe, passing it down as he suggested earlier. I can't help but think this is similar to the concept of occult objects like the Emerald Tablet or the Tablets of Destiny, where the knowledge of the universe was contained therein and passed down. When the French authority asks, "Where is she?" Lucy responds by giving her a message through his cell phone, "I am everywhere." The final line of the film, quote, "Life was given to us 1 billion years ago. Now you know what to do with it." In conclusion, it is clear that this film is an outward expression into the public sphere of the goals for the elite. We saw occult symbols, the Philosopher's Stone, and the quest for immortality. We saw the Luciferian philosophy and the idea of apotheosis and the singularity by which technology will play a major role. But really, is our goal to become God? Not so. In the Bible, we see Lucifer desiring to ascend above the throne of God. In Isaiah 14, verses 13 and 14, God says to Lucifer, "For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." But ultimately, in the next verse, God tells Lucifer what will happen to him. "Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell," or Sheol, to the sides of the pit. And so God's true love for us in Jesus Christ is our hope and our true destiny. Romans 8 verses 31 through 39 tells us, "What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for all of us, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? Who shall bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is to condemn? Jesus Christ is the one who died, more than that, who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, who indeed is interceding for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or danger, or sword? As it is written, for your sake we are being killed all the day long. We are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am sure that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord." Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe and let his face shine upon you.